Hello and welcome back. This is L.A. Rathbone here. Here we are at part 2 of the Slackware Series 2, which is how to use and configure our Slackware system. Now, there's a few things I want to do in this episode. We'll see how far I get, but one of the first things that I want to do is set up what's called the sudo command. And now the sudo command is very useful because it allows us to run commands as root without actually logging in as root or switching to the root user. So that will be very useful for us, especially going forward, so we don't have to keep logging in and out as root. But before I do that, because a few things turn on this, I want to go ahead and change my default editor to Vim rather than VI. Well, I should say rather than Elvis. Which is the default that Slackware has it set up as. Now you'll note that if you run the VI command and press enter, it takes you to a very bare looking screen, whereas if I quit that :Q and run the Vim command, you see that it runs VI improved, which has nice color coding and a lot of features that I just really prefer to the Elvis program. And because I'm an old Red Hat user, I'm used to just typing VI and having Vim appear. So let's configure that. Now, let's take a look at why this is happening in the first place. So if we do ls-l, well, actually first let's type which VI. We see that it's in user bin VI. So I'm going to hit ls-l user bin VI, and again -l gives us more, shows us more of what's going on with the file. So you'll see that it is colored in blue. The first letter on the side here is an L on the permissions. That means it's a link, and it's highlighted in blue. That means it's a symbolic link to the Elvis command. And if we run Elvis, you'll see that takes us to our regular plain looking VI, and again Vim takes us to Vim. So we could go ahead and delete the link and relink Vim to VI, but the problem there is if you take a look at how Slackware actually sets up the Elvis program. And again, all packages, we'll talk more about package management later on, but packages get reinstalled when you upgrade your system. So if we take a look at var log scripts and then Elvis, and I'm using tab completion as always, type the first few letters and press tab, you'll see that every time the Elvis program gets installed, it goes ahead and links Elvis to VI. You can see that happening right over here in this sort of section here. So we could delete the link, but we'd have to change that every single time we upgrade our system. And if you're like me, you don't want to you want to do as little administration as possible with your system once you get it up and running. So let's do this in a different way. I'm going to go ahead and do this for my root user and for the PopRocks user. So let's do that. I'm going to edit my root, or I could do it as the tilde key, which means your home directory, but the home directory for root is just /root. It's not home root. So what we want to do is run Vim on /root .bash _ profile, and I'm going to hit enter, and this is a new file. I'm not going to do it in the etc profile directory file rather, which is the global bash profile settings. The reason being that again, I want to keep things as close to the default system as possible, and if we update Slackware, it's going to see that we've changed that file, and it's going to create more of a headache for us later on. So let's just do that on a per user basis. So what we want to do in that file is export visual equals Vim, and also editor equals Vim. This is not actually specific for setting up sudo, but you'll see that it is. You'll see that it comes into play a little bit later on. Sorry, I should say this doesn't make any difference in terms of typing VI to make Vim run, but it will help open Vim as the default editor in more situations. So that's the first thing we want to do, and that sets the visual as well as the editor environment variables as vim. Now what we want to go ahead and do is create a function called vi, and this function will overwrite any other usage of the vi command for the root user now. And now we want to open a brace because it takes, I forget the name of it, but command groups when you use a function, and that's what a curly brace indicates. Vim, and then open quote, $@ close quote, colon, and that means that's the end of that command. We're not going to make this function run any further commands. That's it. So we close the bracket there. The $@ just means take any arguments from the vi command and apply them to the vim command. And then we want to export, and because we're exporting a function as opposed to a variable, we have to use the -f flag and then vi. Now you may be wondering, LA Rathbone, why don't you use an alias rather than a function? For one thing, the bash man page does indicate that aliases have mainly been deprecated in favor of functions, so that's the one reason why. But the second reason why is you can't export an alias. So if we then went ahead and started up x, for example, which we'll get to later, and ran vi in an x term, then we'd get Elvis and not vi. So we need to make sure that function is exported. So let's go WQ to save and quit that file. Let's log out as root and log back in. And now when we run vi, vim comes up. So that's pretty close to what we want to do for that's exactly what we want to do for our other user as well. So, but I want all my users to, actually no, I don't want all my users to have that functionality specifically. I think the other users should be able to decide for themselves whether they want to have vi run vim. But if I did want them all to be able to run vi and have vim run, what I would do is copy bash profile like so from root, which is the home folder for root, and copy it into etc skell, which we talked about earlier. But I'm not going to do that. I am just going to copy root bash profile to home poprocks, and I'm then going to take a look at that, because that file though in home poprocks, because we need to make sure that it actually has the right permissions for poprocks. So let's do ls-l home poprocks bash profile, and you'll see that our own poprocks user doesn't even have the right permission to access it. So what we could do is, based on previous knowledge, is we could take the other group and make it write and executable, or just writable for the other group. But the problem there is that then anybody would be able to access that file, and we don't want that. We only want poprocks to be able to do it, and we want these exact settings, only poprocks instead of root. So what we want to do is run chown, and then we want to type in the user followed by the group. So poprocks, and you'll recall that users was poprocks' initial group. On home poprocks.bash _ profile. And then if we ls-l again, home poprocks.bash profile, you'll see that it is now properly owned by poprocks. Can read-write it, users can read it, and others can read it as well. So let's log out as root just to test this out. We'll log in as poprocks now. We run vi and we have vim. Okay, let's quit. Let's actually just run a login shell as root. So su dash to log in as root. And that runs a login shell rather than a subshell, an interactive shell, rather a non-login interactive shell for root. I'm only doing that just to make sure that we have everything in our path properly set for root, because if you'll note, if we run echo path, you'll note that sbin files are here, Whereas if we didn't log in as root, we wouldn't have those. And that might not be necessary, but I think that it's definitely something we should take into consideration. So I now want to set up the sudo command. In order to do that, I need to make sure that poprox is part of the wheel group. You'll see why in a minute. So let's vi, we don't have to do vim anymore, etc group. Let's find the wheel group. You'll note that root is the only member of it, so let's add poprox to it by go to the end of the line. If you want to go quickly, you can use the dollar sign. Hit the A key, which takes us in insert mode, but one cursor ahead of the cursor, comma, poprox. That adds poprox to the group. WQ, enter. Now let's log out of this login shell. Takes us back to poprox. Now we also have to log out and log back in of poprox in order for poprox to properly be part of that group. Now if I run the groups command, you'll see that wheel is one of the groups. So let's go back into our root login shell. This is a reason why sudo is a good command to have, because this starts to get time consuming after a while. Run the vi sudo command, and it's important to edit it to do this by way of the vi sudo command, because if you don't, it can create permission errors with sudo. So let's hunt and peck for the right line here. Search for the wheel line using the /, type wheel, hit enter, and you'll note that this option here is the one that we want, and it allows all users of the group wheel to execute any command as long as they type in their password. You could also uncomment this line here if you wanted them to be able to do it without a password, but that I like to have a password prompt because it makes you think before you act when you're running commands as root. So let's go to the beginning of this line, type 0 to go to the beginning of the line, hit 2x, that deletes 2 lines in the file. Now hit :WQ to exit the file, and now we have poprox can use the sudo commands. Let's log out of this login shell, and let's test out the sudo command. So let's try a file that I know I won't be able to open as poprox. So if I take a look at the file var log dmessage, that's a log that I know for a fact, just from previous experience, is permissioned as follows. It's a file. Root has read-write. The user group has read-write permissions, not executable permissions. The group root has read permissions, but not write or executable permissions. And everybody else has no permissions whatsoever. Line, line, line. Okay, so if we tried to use the less command, for example, to look at what's inside that file as poprox, we're going to get an error, permission denied, because we don't even have access to read it. So what we want to do is run sudo less var log dmessage, hit enter. First time you run sudo, you get a little bit of a warning here. Don't worry about that. Type in your password for poprox or your user, not the root password. And now we can take a look at dmessage. And if you quit and run the same command again, it doesn't make you type in the password for a little while. I don't remember the exact amount of time, but you can use sudo and run root commands for a period of time without using your password. So that's pretty nice. Now let's hit Q there to exit the less pager, and we now have the sudo command working, and I've got less than a minute left in this video, so I will say good night and good luck for now on this one, and I will create another video right now and post 2 at a time. So I will see you next time. Cheers.